Hello, Montgomery County. My name is Brandon Langer, and I am the Program Administrator for Instructional Technology in the Office of Professional Learning at Montgomery County Intermediate Unit. And welcome to Talking EdTech with MCIU. This is our series where we like to meet with providers and strategists and innovators in the space of EdTech. And today we have a wonderful opportunity to showcase a pretty unique product in the market in terms of the scope and scale at which it's operating and what it's hoping to achieve with school districts. And that is a program called Abre. And I'm joined today by Chris Rose. I'll let him introduce himself, and then we'll go ahead and get today's conversation about how we're going to meet the needs of learning communities and whole child moving forward post-pandemic. So thanks for joining me, Chris.
Thanks, Brandon, for having me. My name is Chris Rose, and I am a co-founder of Abre. We're a company that founded in 2017. I think our story is a bit unique in the fact that we were, myself and our other co-founder were former educators in a school district. So of course, he was a social studies teacher, I was a math teacher. And about the time of, I would say 2014, we met for the first time, former classroom teachers, and then when we met, we realized we both had a passion for educational technology. And we, of course, were using a lot of different tools in our classroom as teachers. And we said, what does, in our opinion, the next generation a suite of products look like? And that was the time where many schools were going one-to-one with Chromebooks or tablets, et cetera. And we said, we don't think adding another software tool is going to be the answer. Even early in probably 2014, it was very apparent to us that continuing to add software tools actually made things very overwhelming and complicated for not only the district to manage or the school to manage and train, but also the students and the families to even know what to interact with. So about that time inside of a school district, and I always like to emphasize that, we were empowered to create a first version of Abre. So for 3 years, we worked to build a product that was going to serve, and I know we're going to talk about this a little bit later, all of the stakeholders in our learning community, all staff, students, families, and community partners. And after 3 years, it was very successful in our school district that had about 10,000 students and just about over 600 teaching staff. And then we started to get requests of how can we use this in our school district? How can we use this with our families? As different staff members move districts and different family members, oftentimes were even administrators in other schools. So that led us to leave the district in 2017 and found a company around Abre to enable us to take that to other school systems in need.
Yeah, and I think that backstory is, as you highlighted, very unique. And from the standpoint of, it's not like you built something and then you're trying to retrofit it back into a district to find its purpose and its meaning. It was created at a true meaning and purpose within your personal experience as an educator, your partner's experience as an educator. And that really rings through, I think, in a number of these products. And again, we'll highlight a couple today. But to get started today, you just touched on it a little bit, but across your website, across your other materials, we see this idea of whole learning community and addressing whole child, using that as the driving force for your, not just your messaging, but I think your why, your purpose and drive behind creating this product. So can you just talk to us a little bit about that? What's the philosophy there, and how is it moving your product forward?
That's a great question. I think when we look at the product, my title now is VP of Products. I obviously sit pretty closely to all of the functionality and the why behind what we build. And the lens in which we look through any technology that we build, any part of the platform, is how does it serve the student? If it doesn't serve the student and they're not in the center, then we highly question, should we be doing? And so that's a lens in which we think about, and we think about all of the stakeholders in the learning community. And I do want to define what we consider learning community. Mm-hmm. That is any individual that is taking part in helping that student be successful. So when we say staff, the reason why we say staff is because there are so many more staff members that are helping students than just teachers. Again, I was a former teacher, but you've got counselors, you've got administrators. Many schools we work with have a new role called advisors or wellness advisors now that we're starting to see, and mentors that are mentoring the student that are staff members. So all teaching staff, of course, the students themselves have to have access. All family members, not just the primary contact or guardian. Many of times that might be a grandparent or an aunt and an uncle also participating in some school function. And then community partners, which are a wide variety of, tutoring services or college and career readiness supports or internships and apprenticeships, et cetera, that would be engaging with that student maybe for a post-graduation plan. So again, but that student is in the center. So if you look at through the product of the student being in the center and then thinking about what do we need to do from a product standpoint to enable those staff, those families, and those partners to better serve the student to promote the best possible scenario for a student outcome. That's really when we think about the entire learning community, putting the student in the center. That's what we strive to do.
Yeah, and again, we've had a couple conversations even prior to this, and one of the reasons I wanted to showcase this product is what you just highlighted. And we hear a lot about in the space of teaching and learning that we need to be more student-centered in teaching and learning. Well, how are we going to do that if our products themselves are not putting the student at the center of our of the product itself, right? And something that quickly became apparent is not only that is a belief of your companies, but that's actually how the product itself functions. I was introduced to Abre, and you showed me this hub, this centralized place where data is connected and across platforms into a centralized location. And that's just one thing that the product did. It's like, well, you're launching something that is legitimately putting the student at the center of the conversation. And with that, we can then go beyond, I hesitate to say this way, but a simple MTSS academic conversation, we can go so much farther. And the MTSS assessment is no longer the end. It is the process by which to kick off. And then the platform supports a number of different ways of continuing to improve learning for all students. You mentioned a couple other things there too, and we don't have all the time in the world today, but behavior and wellness and just taking all these different ideas and interweaving them into one platform is pretty unique. We don't see that. A lot of single-use products specialize on one area of focus. You're really doing a job of creating kind of a web. So in terms of student success, readiness, and intervention and all of that, how do you guys kind of approach that from an actual application standpoint, not just being a place to show data, but a place to actually inform next steps?
Yeah, it's a really great question, and there are a lot of amazing frameworks out there that educators are using today, right? So they might be using PBIS strategies in a framework or an MTSS or an RTI or, some sort of strategy and framework, especially in wellness, maybe using CASEL competencies and doing some wellness assessments to see how students are doing socio-emotionally. There's all kinds of these ideas. And so how we approach things is really to break things down from a data level of what we think really can move the bar or raise flags, or also just show growth and have sort of an indicator is that student being successful? Are they on track for success? So one of the things about our product is we have what's called the Student 360. The Student 360 is a sort of the dashboard, if you will, of all data points that we can tap into that are either created in Abre natively, or that we integrate, and through interoperability, we integrate from tools that the district is already using. So these categories of data are typically things like all of the information that's stored in the student information system, right? So demographics, obviously the student schedule, perhaps, you know, in the student information system, you have family contacts and who are the families that are engaged with the student. And then you've got things like assessments where we integrate with, you know, iReady or MAP or ACT or your state test data, et cetera, directly. Then you've got things like behavior information, right, that you might store in a different system, or maybe you create behavior records, both positive and negative in Abre. We have wellness information that's connected to the CASEL competencies, and we do wellness assessments and wellness emoji-based check-ins in Abre, but you may be already doing that in another tool, and we integrate that. So the list goes on of all of these different data points, but by having the 360, I sort of think about it as, it seems like a very simple question to ask, but oftentimes it's not simple to answer, which is, if I were to say, how is this student doing? You might say, well, what do you mean? Like emotionally, behaviorally, attendance-wise, academically? And so we're able to paint the picture with the Student 360 for you to answer that all in one spot. So when we think about MTSS or these different frameworks, while I think it's awesome to look at that data and then start to provide, you know, those students in groups to provide maybe a tier 2 or tier 3 support. In Abre, you're enabled to see that glimpse of how the student's doing across all of their data points for every student in your district. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, you can identify the students that are weak or need improvement in those areas, and then provide them with the appropriate interventions. But that's how we kind of think about it. It's like, okay, well, let's bring in all the data. If you don't collect and store the data, let's collect it and store it in Abre. Let's integrate with your other tools that are working. We don't believe in ripping and replacing. So if there's a tool that you're really, that's working well, let's not rip it and replace it. Let's integrate it into the Student 360, bring in the data, make meaningful data out of it, and then, you know, be able to help a teacher, help a family member, help an administrator answer the question truly pretty quickly, how is the student doing? The other thing I'll elaborate on that really quickly is, a lot of times, and we're seeing this pretty frequently now, many schools are creating, and there's a lot of different terms for it, their defined district success criteria. It might be a district strategic plan. It might be a framework like a portrait of a graduate. And so when we think about that in Abre directly, you can set your strategic plan. You can set your portrait of success that you want a graduate to have. And so that becomes, in Abre, essentially your indicator rings of completion for that student across all of those data points. And so that's where we really see things going, which is, okay, once you have your strategic plan and you define your plan for a successful graduate, that, oh, by the way, it's probably more than just academics. It's across all of those data points. How can we paint that picture and identify students that are not on track for that success?
Yep, and also give multiple people a view into that. Give multiple people the opportunity to take a look. It's not just this one role. Let's say a teacher had access to this one tool and collected this data. That data now lives in a silo under the teacher's, dashboard in that one tool. The ability to actually triangulate and develop meaning from multiple data points often is also being able to welcome more to the table to actually be part of the conversation. So
that is a critical piece. That is a very critical piece that I want to emphasize, because while there are many great software EdTech tools out there, but what we often see is those many software tools are, well, I can only see that as a building principle. Mm-hmm. And then maybe the family member doesn't even have the ability to see it because they don't have a login to that information. So in Abre, everyone that has access to the data that they need, and I want to emphasize that, the data that they need. So a district can say, here's what a teacher needs, here's what an administrator needs, here's what a family needs. And all of that access can be granularly given. So that, again, our philosophy, the right stakeholder, staff, student, family, or partner can be given the information that they need in order to have and maximize their impact to help student outcomes.
Yep, absolutely. And again, you and I know a little bit because we've talked before. Is there anything you wanted to share today, just to kind of give a view of that, or just if someone's new to Abre, what are we actually talking about? You and I know because we've had previous conversations, but love to just kind of see an example.
Sure, I'll share my screen here. So this is the Student 360 I was referring to. As you can see, we have various categories up at the top. So profile is typically information that we retrieve via a student information sync. When we think about assessments, you can create assessments in Abre, formative, summative assessments, quizzes and tests. You can do that, but we also integrate with state assessments. So that might be Pennsylvania tests, Ohio tests, national tests, math and reading diagnostic tools. Of course, you can see this data in those, as you said, Brandon, you're exactly right, those silos. But again, who has access to that data, and is it meaningful to them? Oftentimes, we still see schools sending home, letters, paper-based letters with this diagnostic testing data, where here we can sync with this data on a 24-hour basis and make it understandable and meaningful to the person that has access to it, including a family member. So of course, assessments is key. Behavior, both positive or negative, and seeing the trends of that over time. If you're a school that's working on improving student behavior, in our opinion, it would be very helpful if that behavior was consistently tracked. And then, of course, when you implement new strategies on improving student behavior, does that positively impact your negative behavior? And how does that, we recommend for every, negative behavior, you have 5 positive behaviors, right? So if 5 positive behaviors are tracked, does that improve the probability that, you're not going to have as many negative behaviors? Of course, grades and activities, we can create grades in Abre. We do have a learning management system component, but many schools have their one that they like. So let's just integrate those activities and assignments in Abre and make them visible to that family member again, so they have a single place to go. When we think about wellness, this is the wellness advisor I was referring to. It might be an advisory teacher, it might be a classroom teacher, it might be a counselor. But who is that individual that is overseeing their students' wellness? And then again, giving them the data so that as new wellness assessments come in or emoji-based surveys come in, just like we look at the academic part of the student under assessments and grades, let's look about the health of the student when it comes to wellness. And that might be emoji-based surveys, that might be more formalized, CASEL competency aligned assessments. And we're not just collecting that data from the student. While that's really helpful to see how they're doing and how they're feeling, let's start to collect that information from the staff and family as well, as a multi-informant way to see if those things are lining up of what's being observed from a wellness perspective.
And Chris,
of course,
something that
yeah.
you're doing
Just
on multiple of these dashboards that you showed me already. I love that the graphs are not just all the same. So many platforms you get in there and the data is all represented in the exact same format with the exact same tools and descriptions and all of that in the name of, in the name of continuity. But like data can be represented differently. And that's something that data scientists understand. And we as educators aren't always in that camp, right?
Sure.
We're not data miners. We're not, not all of us anyway. We weren't trained to do that. I love that this platform has taken the steps to represent wherever the data is coming from in a meaningful and purposeful way, not just putting it all in one place in the exact same bar graph, which is something I see very often in the space.
Yeah, absolutely. And, when we really, and it's hard to do this, to sort of put yourselves in the shoes, right, of all of those stakeholders that we think about, right? Families, staff, students, administrators, and partners. And especially when you start to think about families, right? Families, a lot of times if I put myself, I have a daughter, We get their math data. I don't know what a RIT score is,
Right.
but I know if the chart is going up and to the right and they're improving on math and reading, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's really super critical, because not just for families, but all of the other people serving the student, they may not be familiar with CASEL competencies. They may not be familiar with different terminology that we often take for granted in education. So if we
Well,
are
not to
going
mention all the acronyms on your screen right there. I mean, AP,
exactly,
ACT, MAP, OELPA, STAR. I mean, like, people don't.
yeah,
It's a complicated, and we learned this through the
yeah,
pandemic, right? People are like, wait, what's a Nearpod? Like, what's
that's
that?
right.
You know, we had to learn all these tools as parents. So no, I agree.
So the point is yeah, we have to make it very, very simple, because if you don't make it simple, it's not going to be understood. And if it's not understood, it can't be used. The data can't be used by that individual to help that student.
Mhm. Sorry, I cut you off right as you were going to forms. I just thought it was important to call out that as kind of
Yeah.
baseline feature of the platform.
Well, and I think as we start to think about data visualization, again, it's very role based, right? So I'll take a little bit of a tangent here and go to more of an administrative view of this, right? So Abre Insights, it doesn't really make sense possibly for an administrator or a superintendent to really look at that data at an individual student. Probably they're not going to have the time to do that, right? But if you can say, hey, let me look at my state assessment data, and let me look at this at all buildings or certain buildings, or by any filters you make, let me target the students that may be at risk or below basic. Like, that's a different meaningful dashboard. So this dashboard would not really probably make sense to a family or a teacher, but to an administrator or building principal, very meaningful. That can help you start to think about the intervention resources you need, targeting the right students, creating some of the schedules, ultimately trickling down to, once mentors are assigned to that student, teachers are helping those students, and then giving them the data at the level they need in order to, again, maximize their instructional practices. But yeah, forms. So obviously we can collect forms that might be registration forms, enrollment forms. You can also create, as we've seen very frequently, you can create your own survey forms. So it might be for your community, right? So how you might ask a form or a survey for families only, or climate surveys for students themselves. Those can be very easily built by dragging and dropping in Abre. And of course, that data can then be connected back to the student, or again, like in Insights, I was showing you, rolled up to show you what the common responses were or answers were. Now, again, there's a lot of tools out there that do that one thing, right?
Mhm.
And those oftentimes are great tools, but is it integrated within the meaningful experience by connecting all of the other data points and SIS, et cetera? And then partners. So one of the things that we see, especially in larger districts, is they work with a lot of different partners. Those might be wellness partners. Those might be college and career readiness partners that are providing internships and apprenticeships. You might have career tech education schools that are really about starting to get the right students in front of the right careers so that they can establish a career pathway. And so partners really play a critical role, and we could get into this if the conversation goes here, but you can create these different partners within your Abre environment. And so families are able to say, oh, well, this student is aligned to this partner, and they can actually selectively choose to share certain information that makes sense for that partner to have. So oftentimes we see, like, well, a student is receiving academic supports by a tutor for math or reading. Well, it'd be great if the tutor actually had the grades and the assessments for math and reading, right? So this can be, so you can share certain pieces of information, and only once families have given a data consent for those pieces of information, is information flowing between the student, the family, and of course, ultimately to the partner. So again, really important for student data privacy. We see a lot of data being shared with partners in unfortunately very insecure ways by emailing spreadsheets or printing out data. We believe in opting in, not opting out. So data to share, you have to opt into it. And once it's shared, it can always be taken away as well. And you're not left with this paper sheet that's out there that's unsecure. And then when we think about plans, so again, there's a reason why that this is not called an MTSS tab here, because there are so many different types of education plans or groups or strategies that students can be put on. They might be on an individualized education plan, an IEP. They might be on a 504. They might be on an MTSS plan. They might be on an attendance improvement plan. You know, the list goes on and on and on. And so, again, as a former classroom teacher, we had a lot of these things, but these were in those silos, right? So oftentimes I was never able to even look at the plan because I had to go to here to look at the IEP. I had to go to here to look at the MTSS plan. I had to go to here to look at this plan. And as classroom teachers, I think, especially in the past couple of years, we can all relate. We don't have the time, the energy, the strength to go and spend all of that time to really dig into that as we should. So let's put it in the hand, right, very quickly. So any plan that is created that the student is on, let's allow that to be tracked, and only the plans that are connected to that student will be visible. And that can be provided as read-only copies of these plans if the district wants to provide it as a read-only copy. So you might have plans that say, well, this staff member can edit that plan, but every staff member can view that plan only. And you can have plans that are visible to, again, those stakeholders. So maybe you want families to see a specific plan and only have the ability to view it. You can absolutely do that. So when we think about plans, it's around being very flexible for schools to bring their own flavor of how they want to track progress and progress monitor on plans. And we have templates, of course. You know, you don't have to start from scratch, but building your own customized plan is pretty quickly and easily done.
Yeah, and I need to emphasize, I mean, if you've made it to this point, you've seen a tremendous amount of this platform from how it takes a whole community approach to the student. There are whole other layers to what Abre has built that is goes above and beyond that. I mean, down to things like a curriculum application that the district could use to basically create curriculum maps and lessons, a payment, application to help integrate and connect stakeholders when you need to just do simple things like make a payment and provide that option for people. I mean, we've hit a lot on, and Chris, thank you for kind of breaking that down for us. But that student, piece is critical and to who you are as a core. But what's amazing is that you guys just continue to build out around that and make the school bigger than just the building. And I know that's a huge part of your philosophy of just trying to summarize for anybody that may be hearing the word Abre for the first time, just how big an approach and how inclusive an approach you're taking to everybody.
Abre means to be open. I want to emphasize
does it?
that.
Okay.
Abre means to
I
be
wondered
open.
that. I wondered what that meant. Okay.
Yeah, and it's intentional. We didn't just pick it because it was a cool sounding name or it started with A or whatever, right? It was Abre, Abre.com, which was where we are, means to be open. And we believe in opening up the learning community by connecting what matters. And what matters might be from district to district, right? Every district and every school is going to have kind of their flavor on what matters. Is it emphasis on wellness, emphasis on academics, emphasis on college and career readiness? You can kind of, toggle those levers of what matters to your community. But really it's getting the community connected, opening up the doors so that we can empower and enable every member to, again, serve student at the center.
Yeah, and again, I think it's coming across both in your knowledge of the education space, which is very helpful and sometimes missing in tech, but your knowledge of that the approaches may be different within the district, but the means by which we can do it can be unified and connected, and I just think that's so great. So I want to thank you for joining, program today and kind of just giving us a very quick rundown of the platform, but also just a little bit about the intention and philosophy behind what you're doing. We've been talking for a little over a year, just keeping up to date with what you guys are doing. It just seems like there's been such great development in your product, which I personally love to see. And I love that we can consolidate a toolkit into a more usable platform, an accessible platform. So I just hope you guys keep doing what you're doing, because it seems like you're onto something from my perspective.
I appreciate that so much and appreciate your time today, Brandon.
Yeah, no problem. In terms of, I always forget this part, next steps, how could someone take the next step to either meet with Abre or take a deeper
Yeah.
dive? How would you advise them to do that next?
Great question. Easiest way is to visit our website, abre.com. Abre.com has the resources out there that are some comprehensive guides. So if you're looking for how can Abre support the MTSS framework, we have a guide out there that explains that. If you're looking for a particular solution, like a well-being solution or a community engagement solution, or maybe just something as simple as learning management or school management, we can do those things. So those solutions are out there. Of course, it shares our philosophy around putting the student in the center. And then there's a big button on the website, schedule a demo. That would be a great resource. And we like to keep demos short and easy to just see if there's a fit. Of course, there's no agreement or anything by doing a demo. It's just giving us an opportunity to figure out how we can best serve the school district is what the demos or the first demos are all about.
Yep, and I'll wrap, just by saying that I've done a couple of those myself. Chris isn't lying. They're not there to waste anyone's time. They're there to show you what you are looking and help meet your need. It's a modular product. It's not, you have to buy everything. You can find and plug in the pieces that you want to deploy. So definitely worth checking out if you're interested. But Chris, once again, thank you for your time, and we'll look forward to seeing where you guys head in the future.
Thanks so much.